So, dear friends, we are in the middle of July and God has blessed us with so many things. I just want to bless and thank God for all that He has been to us and in the different ways that He shows His presence among us. Let me begin with the message of this week. It's a beautiful parable. The parable of the sower. As we see, it's a special parable. Perhaps we can even say it's a parable of parables, because Jesus is a master storyteller. He is very sensitive. He is very observant. See how he observes the sower throwing the seeds, as it were. And there is meaning to everything that he attaches, and especially a meaning for us. As you know, the story of the parable of the sower goes out to sow, and some of it falls on the pathways, some falls on the rocky places, and the others in the thorns and the bushes. And lastly, there is a situation of the seed that falls on real good ground. And so these four situations that Jesus explains to the people are very typical of any one of us. The sower, as we are told, is the Lord Himself, who comes and throws His seeds, as it were. And it's for us to understand what my condition is, where the seed is sown. Am I, first of all, is the seed that has fallen in me, or perhaps that I have received, is it the pathways and the byways? When the sower throws his seeds, it's natural that something slips out of his hands and falls on that pathway that we have in between the fields as such. And it's obvious, surely it will grow there. But since the people are constantly moving out, it will be crushed. And for that, the meaning for us is, there are so many things in our world that crush us. There are so many things that we are so occupied, and therefore there is no scope for that thing to come up, the seed to come up. We have to ask ourselves, am I so busy that the Word of God is surely coming up in my life? Sometimes I read it, sometimes I take it, but then perhaps not much importance is given. Secondly, the seed that falls on the rocky stones. Sometimes in the fields there are some rocks or rocky patches are there, and it falls there. And Jesus says, as anyone would say, that there are those small holes or perhaps grooves there in the rocks where there is mud, and therefore the seed comes up so easily, very quickly, but it won't last long because their roots cannot go in. It's a hard rock. It could happen to any of us, that perhaps the seed that is sown in me is also blocked by so many hard things, my passions, my evil habits, my prejudices. Sometimes some prejudices are so hard that we can't poke, we can't even make a small dent into our rocky surface of our life. And thirdly, we have that seed that falls on perhaps a little on the sideways, and the bushes, the thorns are there. The farmer sometimes has not much time to clean up the whole field, and this seed that falls in those bushes where there are thorns is like our own heart. It grows, but there are so many thorns in our life that poke or choke the seed. I am occupied with so many things. I have no time for the Word of God. I have so many worries that I call myself worries, though I know that God can take care of my worries, but many a time they don't leave me. And sometimes some pleasures some conveniences, some compromises that I make also choke the Word of God. And finally, we have the good seed, the good land, the good field, where fortunately Jesus says it can grow up 30 times, 60 times, or even 100 times. And so the big question mark, the word is sown, but how is it sown in us, in our persons, in our personalities, in our hearts and minds? There's one thing that perhaps some would ask. The parable is good, but Jesus could have perhaps concentrated on a farmer that was very intelligent and did it works very patiently. And instead of just throwing the seeds just like that, he could have gone row by row and poured it. And perhaps, of course, one thing is the farmers know better, and they can't, perhaps with having long rows, they can't waste time, so they would throw also and go. But what I'm intending is the farmer careless, or perhaps just not bothered? I would say perhaps that's the spirit of Jesus also. He's generous. He's generous in sowing. And surely he knows that sometimes it might spill here and there. But give a chance. Give a chance. Perhaps even if it's in a rocky field or at the side of the pathways or in the bushes, there is still a chance. I think God gives a lot of chances. God takes chances with us. He allows us, and He perhaps even expects those miracles that sometimes, even on hard surfaces, even in thorny situations, something can grow, which means God has trust in us. If perhaps up to now our life has been a jumble of rocks and thorns and perhaps paths, we can still perhaps make a small surface there, make it grow, make it develop and also bear fruit. So my dear brothers and sisters, as I said, it's a beautiful parable. It's a parable of parables, and that gives significance to the Word of God in our own life. And remember that the Word of God is never wasted. The first reading, in fact, the reading of Isaiah says, the words that come from my mouth are never wasted. Just like the water that falls from the skies, it falls on the ground and bears fruit. So also the Word of God, if we accept it well in all humility and simplicity and ask God to produce the fruits in us, surely they will be fruits.